just go quickly around the room, the two of you. Give me just two of your rules.
Okay.
Okay, so use food as a sort of like a money. Okay. And what else?
I think also want to support like a family, so if the farmer is working and the housewife will stay and I take care of them.
So take care of the children. So basically do what housewives normally do, like cook, clean, all of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good, thank you. And the two of you?
Then we will have tax rule.
Tax rule?
Yeah, like the government will take tax from people like once a month or once a year. And the poor can pay less than the rich.
Okay. What do you do with the taxes?
Yeah, the government can build hospitals for the poor.
Okay.
Or they can buy food, buy products from farmers and donate to the poor people.
And so let me give you I'm just going to quickly address this as it comes up, but at this time, they don't have taxes the way we do now. Like we have income tax in most countries now, and that idea doesn't exist. And income tax is a really new concept. It's really just in the last 100 years. And before that, taxes were really small. You barely paid any taxes. You only paid taxes on luxury goods like snuff, the stuff that people would sniff, and later tobacco, and then tea, but very little compared to what we pay now in taxes. So this was a society that was really pre-tax. And in England, they had some very funny taxes. So when the king needed to raise money very quickly, I'll tell you a really funny one. It's called a window tax. So for how many windows you had in your house, you paid a certain tax. So if you go to the north of England, you'll find even today many of windows are bricked. People would just seal them up so they didn't have to pay those taxes. And places like Holland, the tax would be on the stairways, whether you had one or two stairways to go into your house and how wide they were. So they were not the way we see them now where you go to a store and you pay tax and whatever, but it was on very random things and there was very little of it. One of the things that I overheard Danny say here is it's something about the government. What was it you said? The government can collect the taxes or something. I think. So this is really interesting. Is that basically the idea of government too? When we go to these colonies, is not going to be the same. It's not. When we think of government, we think of a king or a president, and a lot of elected officials. The whole what we call a bureaucracy, a bunch of people working for the king or the emperor, whoever it is. We have police, we have firemen, we have all these different forces of the government. And what we're going to have, and what we're going to read now, is a very different idea than a government. Instead, it's something called a covenant, which is a religious term, covenant, and it has to do with, it's an agreement. Does everybody know what an agreement is? So like, at the most basic kind of agreement is that your parents say that you can have an allowance and get a certain amount of money every week if you keep your room clean. So you keep your room clean. I know you have to work for under minimum wage, but
100 per hour.
100 per hour. He works for his dad, but he gets paid very little. But some kids they just get money from their parents, and all they have to do is like clean their room or do chores like wash dishes or help out or whatever. So that's an agreement. When you don't clean your room, then I, as your parent, don't have to give you the money. Simple. No government involved. I'm not calling the police to enforce this. It's just an agreement between the two of us. So when the Puritans go, they have something called a covenant. That's what John Winthrop talks about. And the idea goes back to the Bible, to the Old Testament. So there's stories in there that God speaks to certain Jews, right? To certain important Jews, the Old Testament is the stories of the Jews. They have a history of being captive or conquered by other countries around them. And the one major one is when they were captured by the Egyptians, and they were brought to Egypt as slaves for hundreds of years. And the story is Moses, who was a man who worked for Pharaoh. You've heard of Pharaoh, right? The Egyptian king. Moses was a Jew, but he became very important to the Pharaoh. But he also wanted to help the Jews leave Egypt out of captivity. And God spoke directly to Moses and said that God would help the Jews come out of Egypt and out of slavery and out of tyranny if they followed certain rules. And these rules were really about being good people. They weren't just about following rules. It was about being a good person. And we'll discuss what that is here. What does it mean to be a good person? And so the story is that the Jews did leave Israel and they went back home. And the story is a very, very important one for Jews. They still, if you've heard of the Passover, they still, every year, it's the most important Jewish holiday. They celebrate their release from bondage, from slavery in Egypt. Basically, thousands of years later, they have the story. But it also became very important to Christians. And John Winthrop is, when the Puritans are leaving England, how do you think the story of Exodus, how they might think about themselves as being like the Jews? They've got a king at home who doesn't like them. They can't practice their religion the way they want. They're afraid of perhaps being killed. You know what the punishment was for somebody who was what's called a religious heretic, for somebody who practiced their religion in a way that the king didn't think was right? What the punishment was?
Kill.
Yeah, but how? Killed how?
Cut their head.
No. Cutting the head is a good way to die. No, truly, it's very fast. So that was the punishment. So John Winthrop really saw the Puritans leaving England as being like the Jews. It was as an exodus. And so in the beginning of the speech, when he talks about a covenant, an agreement, he's making a reference to the same thing. So that's what we talk about, a literary reference to the Bible and the idea of a covenant. So we're not talking about going to the United States, or not the United States at this time, just America, and having a government. Instead, we're going to have an agreement. The agreement is between each other. You guys have set up rules. So we don't have anybody enforcing us that's going to punish us, that's going to burn us, but that we'll have rules that we all agree to. And we have an agreement with God. What does that mean to have an agreement with God? If you believe in God, how can you have an agreement with God? I think about this all the time. My agreement with God. You pray? Yeah. Why do you pray? That's right. To pray about what you're doing bad, because we all do bad things, whether we want to admit it or not. We think bad things about our parents, about our friends, we may do bad things. And we can also pray about things we want, or just because we're sad. So there's a lot of things you can pray for. And the Buddhists, they pray and they meditate, and it's the same thing. What else would be a covenant, an agreement with God? What else would you think would include an agreement with God, Dr. Chow?
It's just like a kind of commitment. Your belief, your commitment.
Right.
Right.
Expectations. And those expectations are the covenant in Exodus, what I was talking to, Exodus, which is, that means when you're released from bondage, or when you go away, Exodus, but it's also a book, the name of a book in the Bible. And in that there are commitments. One of them is to love God above all others, but also to honor your father and mother. Sometimes it's hard to do that when they get you angry. And it's even harder when you get older. But to honor your father and mother. Not to kill. That's one of the covenants. Not to commit adultery. That is, when you're married, not to be with somebody else. And so there's things like that would be agreements. You know, when you kill somebody, it's more likely that somebody will find out. But there's a lot of things that you can do without anybody knowing. But you do have, if you believe in God, you know that somebody knows.
So Jeffrey,
Yes.
I didn't. Please remember the Ten Commandments.
The Ten Commandments.
Right?
And that is, so the Ten Commandments are, those were the part of this covenant that Moses actually receives from God, these 10 commandments. They're basically like 10 rules. So the ones that I mentioned, to respect your parents, to love God, not to commit adultery, not to worship idols. So those are all parts of the agreement. The important thing is to know that there's no government involved.
Mm-hmm.
So in Exodus it says, God says, if you will obey my voice and keep my covenant, so my agreement, you shall be mine among all peoples. In other words, the Jews have always thought that they are chosen, right, above all other people. And the Puritans had the same notion of being chosen. Like the Jews, they took upon that idea. So these people, when they went to America, had the notion that they were chosen. This is still an idea that Americans have of being a chosen country by God. And we'll see this in Reagan's speech, and see this in John Winthrop, and we'll see this even in Obama's, of being chosen by God as being much better and more special than any other country.
So they look down others.
No, and that's what we'll see. Is it looking down? We'll look at Reagan's speech. By the way, mentions Taiwan. So, and we'll look at Obama's speech. And so, does that mean if you're the chosen country, does that mean that you're better? Actually, it does mean you're better. If I say if I'm better than you, Danny, I think I'm better than you. I'm smarter. I've been to school longer. I have more money. I have two choices. Either I can make you feel bad about yourself, or I can give to you what I have. And I think that that's the way these, President Reagan and Obama have envisioned that betterness, is to help other people in other countries, to extend the wealth to new immigrants, so that you can think of that superiority of being better. But that is part of this idea, and it comes way, way back from the Puritans here, who are going, and they believe that they are chosen. They're chosen to bring a pure form of Christianity. And so, let's see what John Winthrop actually says. Let's look at the speech. Thus stands the cause between God and us. We are entered into covenant with Him for this work. We have taken out a commission. The Lord hath given us leave to draw our own articles. Okay, basically he's saying that, so we have an agreement, because we're religious people, we have an agreement with Him. Him is with a capital H. Who's that? When you put a capital H like that? Who's Him?
God.
God. It's not King Charles, right? No. So we only put that for God or for Jesus with a capital H. We're entered into a covenant and agreement with God, not with the king. Notice this. I'm going into an agreement with God, not with the king. And we are going to take our orders, that is the commission. We've taken out a commission. We're taking out our orders from God. And then it says, the Lord God hath given us leave to draw our own articles. What does that mean? Can anybody paraphrase that? Okay, a passage, right? So often it's used like a newspaper article.
Oh.
Okay, that is one way of using the word article.
Bible.
So you can talk about articles in a Bible. So there's sections, and oftentimes what it's used in law for articles are the different parts of the law. So what it's saying is, so God has given us the permission to write our own laws. This is really radical. It's very drastic when you think about it. If you come from a society where there's a king, and that's the way the world has been for hundreds and hundreds of years, to say we're going to come up with our own rules is a very radical thing to say. He's lucky he was on the ship, or with this, but it's probably John Winthrop was already on the ship to America when he made this speech, because he might have gotten in trouble if he said this in England. So I'm just going to skip a little ahead and just go on to this next line, which says, "We have hereupon besought him of favor and blessing."
We have hereupon besought him of favor and blessing. Now, if the Lord shall please to hear us, and bring us in peace to the place we desire, then hath he ratified this covenant and sealed our commission, and will expect a strict performance of the articles contained in it. But if we shall neglect the observation of these articles, which are the ends we have propounded, and dissembling with our God, shall fall to embrace this present world and prosecute our carnal intentions, seeking great things for ourselves and our posterity, the Lord will surely break out in wrath against us, and be revenged of such a people, and make us know the price of the breach of such a covenant.
Okay, so they're going to make an agreement with God and with each other to maintain peace. Now, what will happen? What's he saying will happen if they break their agreement with God? And what it means to break an agreement, we'll figure out. But what will happen if they break the agreement? Yeah, there'll be punishment. So what he's saying is, we don't have a king who's going to punish us. We can do whatever we want at this point. But what we are going to do is we're making this agreement with God. And if we break it, we will have to deal with whatever happens. And so he mentions carnal intentions. If we embrace this present world and prosecute our carnal intentions, which means if we embrace this world means if we become very material and just follow what we want. Carnal is of the flesh, meaning the things that we just desire, like money and power and eating a lot and whatever we want, then we will deserve the bad things that should happen to us. That's basically what he's saying. And so what does it mean to be in agreement with God? What does that mean? We mentioned some of the things before. Let's go down further, because he'll explain exactly what he means.
We must entertain each other in brotherly affection. We must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities for the supply of others' necessities. We must uphold a familiar commerce together in all meekness, gentleness, patience, and liberality. We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, always having before our eyes our commission and community in the work. As members of the same body, so shall we keep the unity of the Spirit in the bonds of peace.
Okay, things that are mentioned here are a lot of things that you guys mentioned when you were trying to figure out what the rules would be in this new society. So I know there's a lot of kind of high-level vocabulary here, right? So quite a number of different words. Posterity, and we must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities. Abridge means if you have an abridged book, it means it's a shortened book. It's not as long. And superfluities are things that you don't need. So what that means is to cut out the things that you don't need so that you can supply other people. Instead of hoarding everything out, instead of just accumulating everything for yourself, you have more, you give to others, right? And we must entertain brotherly affection. What is brotherly affection?
Like brother?
Like a relation, like you and your sister, even though you're brother and sister, would be called brotherly. And so the love between the two of you, right? You have a certain love. You would have to have the same love for me, even though I'm not your brother.
We all have to be together.
Right. Exactly.
Cooperate.
Yes, cooperate, precisely. Later in the next line, we must uphold a familiar commerce together in meekness, gentleness, patience, and liberality. Those are a whole bunch of other words too. Meekness. That means I'm not pushy. I'm actually humble. Gentleness. You know what gentleness is, right? Patience. Liberality means being generous. It means giving to others. We must delight in each other. We must enjoy each other. Make others' conditions our own. What does that mean? Anybody have a guess? Okay, it means if like you're sick, instead of me saying, like I said, you can say, all right, leave the town. I would say, what would it be like if I were sick now? Rejoice together. What is rejoice? It means to celebrate, to be happy together.
Have joy.
Have joy together, exactly. How about mourn together? What is that? When somebody dies, we'll all come together and grieve them and mourn. Labor and suffer together. And be in the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. So be peaceful together. All right, and then the section here that is in italics in that second paragraph.
For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. So that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world.
Okay. So he says, the city, all eyes are upon us. So if we deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, that is the work we're doing, and cause God to withdraw, that is to no longer want to help us, be present for us, then we, as a colony, will just be a story that people have forgotten. And people, because we're religious people and we went here, right? People are going to say, oh, that's what happens to religious people. And so God wasn't protecting them. Maybe there is no such thing as God because these people were very, very religious and still nothing good happened for them. So for John Winthrop, what happens to this colony is really important because it's going to show the world what happens when a small group of people who are very religious set out and try to create their own society, their own new colony, in a way that's never, ever, ever been done before. Right? That's what's so interesting about this. It's an experiment. It's never been done. And this is what Reagan is going to talk about this moment, and Obama as well. So what is the city upon the hill? And I ask you, Cindy, let's pretend you're the teacher. I'm saying, Cindy, can you help me understand what city upon a hill was? What would you suggest that I do to figure out what city upon a hill means? How are you answering that question, though? How are you figuring out what a city upon a hill is? Are you just taking a guess? Or is there somewhere that you're getting this idea of what the city upon a hill is? Because we haven't seen this anywhere else. It's a new idea. So how are you helping to explain to me what it is? Okay. Okay, so you're using your imagination. You're picturing a city upon a hill to answer my questions and figure out what it means. So that's one way of doing this, to figure it out, is to use your imagination. I see a city up on a hill. Well, it's hard to miss a city on a hill. You're going to see it, so it has a very strong place that none of us can avoid seeing. So he's imagining that the whole world is seeing this little colony, which of course isn't true. But in his mind, the whole world is seeing it. Yes. How else might I try to figure out what this idea of a city upon a hill is?